right, good morning, people. I am Franchesca Thompson, the founder of Birch, and Birch is an educational resource company, and we provide resources for parents, teachers, community leaders, because we want you to thrive. And today we are going to be talking about kids, race, protest, and empowerment with the one and only Ms. Lynn Peabody Smith. All right, she is a licensed professional counselor, a pastoral counselor, and she has her own practice, the Peabody Practice. She works with families, couples, and young adults. Ms. Lynn Peabody Smith, please tell us a little more about you. How long have you been doing this? And just any other things you want to share.
Sure. Well, I absolutely love the world of professional counseling. I have been in counseling since almost 20 years. Oh my gosh.
Really?
In some form or another. I've been licensed for 10 years.
Mhm.
I am a professional counselor, and I also do pastoral counseling, which that's what I've been doing the longest. And that means bringing faith into our sessions. I also have spent some time teaching on a college level, and I'm an ordained minister. But I think most importantly for this discussion, I am a mom of a blended family of 7 children.
Wow.
Our youngest is 12 and our oldest is 26. So 4 boys and 3 girls.
Yes. And that's great because I am also a mom, and this has been a lot to take in just for me. And I don't know what my 11-year-old is thinking. So I really wanted to have this conversation with you to help other parents as well. And something happened to the video. There we go. So the question is, we have seen a lot of families. There's been a lot of racial tension lately. We have seen people on social media. We've seen it on the news. We've seen everything. Families taking kids to protest. And so the big question is, before we even get to the protest part, when should we be having conversations with our kids about racial identity? And, before we even get to the protest part, shouldn't there be some kind of conversation or something that goes on before we even start being a part of a movement?
Absolutely. If you think about it, kids learn colors and shapes as toddlers, right? They know the difference between a square and a circle. In that same time frame, they're learning the difference between someone who is short or tall, somebody who is a darker skin or a lighter skin.
Mm-hmm.
What they don't know is the negativity or the biases.
Yeah.
That's learned from the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about differences and the beauty of differences early on is important. I'm not a big fan of, trying to teach children to be colorblind.
Yeah.
Because that takes away a part of someone's identity. And so deep down in the core, we're all the same, but we are also uniquely different, and that's okay too.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about just the conversations. Our household is similar to yours. Whereas, we have 4 adults living here. I have my 2 oldest children that are here from college, me and my husband, and then we have the 11-year-old. And so I had to think about it. Have we, our conversations as adults, I don't think we take in consideration sometimes about that 11-year-old that is listening in, and the things that we cut. You watch the news, you get a text, you get a news article, and those things just pop up instantly, and you want to talk about what's going on. And so, like for other families that are going through this, how are we to navigate those conversations with them, I really don't know how to include her. But I know she's getting a little bit of it because I see her watching Nickelodeon and they're putting stuff on the TV about
Mm-hmm.
Black Lives Matter. So how do we have those conversations? What age do we start having those conversations? And
Well, I'm sorry.
go
We
ahead.
actually start talking about them very young, again, in that uniqueness, and people are wonderfully different in a beautiful way. But we also have to keep in mind that it's important to talk to our kids about it because they're already talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Their friends are talking about it. They're watching it, like you said, on TV. They are, if they're on social media, they're seeing it. And we want our children to have an accurate point of view. And so
Yes.
that's the importance of sharing what we feel and what we think. But even more important than that is listening to our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much the talking, but listening so that we can see where they're at. What are they thinking?
Yeah.
What are they feeling? What do they need to know more about?
Yeah. And I just feel like we've got to start having those conversations with them. I'm a teacher as well, and so the one thing that I don't want to happen is for kids to come back to school and their parents have not had these conversations. Um, I think it's imperative for parents to sit down with their kids and talk about racial injustice, inequality, the protest, and all of those things. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Now, the reality is, many of us are already talking about race in our homes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be very honest with my young Black boys. I am constantly talking to them about how to respond when they're pulled over by a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
In many homes, that's not even a thought, a concern, or a discussion at all. So
Yeah.
we are really already um, talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
People often think that kids can't understand, but I don't care if you have a 5-year old or a 15-year-old. One thing you have heard time and time again is what? It's not fair.
Yeah.
Right? So you take that concept of it's not fair and you apply it to this.
Mm-hmm.
In the idea that people are being treated in a way that's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
And think about what that makes you feel like. And that's a good lead into talking about the protest and things like that. The the other part of having a conversation is to also be able to practice what you preach.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to say that the world is diverse and we should respect and honor other ethnicities and nationalities, then our children need to see us doing that.
Yes.
So if everybody that comes to visit us is of the same skin color or comes from the same country, then we're not really practicing what we preach.
Yes.
More than a discussion is we all learn by experience. So taking your children to a festival. Two of my kids love the Japanese culture, so we'll go to
Yeah.
like the Japanese festival,
Yeah.
but showing them and experiencing, allowing them to experience those things. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just really sitting down and talking, that's great, but
Yeah.
also giving them the opportunity to experience
Yes.
diversity. We
And that's,
often don't know we're often unsure about what we don't know.
yeah.
And so the best way is to begin to know by experience.
Absolutely. I am a big fan of exposure is key. And that's how you deal with race is that you have to show them what diversity looks like.
Hmm.
It has to be a part of your life because that will even help with some of the problems that happen in school. One of the books that I wanted to recommend as a book for parents or educators to read is this one right here. It is Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?
Right.
It's an innovative way to talk about race, explain developments of racial identity and things like that. And so what you're saying is key. You have to have those conversations. And if you don't know, a lot about it. You know, if you feel like you're not educated in that area and you want to learn, you've got to pick up some resources. You've got to
Absolutely.
learn how to have those conversations. And I love the fact that you said, as simple as talking to a 5-year-old and explaining the concept of it's not fair. I think sometimes as parents, we think we have to have these big grand old conversations with our kids, and they feel intimidated. They don't want to sit down and have these big grand conversations with us. It could be little tidbits here and there. It doesn't have to have let's sit at the table and have a meeting, guys, and talk about race. It could just be as you're going about your day, you could see something and you have a conversation about that. So,
Absolutely.
that's what I'm hoping that parents can understand. So now let's jump right into the protest. Should we be taking kids to protest? Should we not? What's the age? How should we be doing this?
So again, I think it's important to allow your children to guide you.
Mm-hmm.
What do they want to do? And, believe it or not, there are enough protests or experiences that you can find one that would be almost age appropriate or that would kind of work. My daughters came to me and said that they wanted a protest. And I was like, we're not going, downtown someplace. What are you talking about? Not right now. And for them, it was like, but we always go downtown.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? And so trying to balance not making them too anxious.
Yes.
And so I said, well, help me to understand what's making you want to protest.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, we want to get the message out. I said, okay, well, you can use social media, but we want to be with other people and other kids who think like us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to find a protest that was being held by high school students.
Yeah.
And taking them to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it really, it's really going to be based on your family.
Yeah.
And your children.
Mm-hmm. And I believe that too. It's a case by case basis.
Mm-hmm.
My older kids did participate, and they actually learned a lot about protest. There's the organized protest, and then I can't remember the name of the other one. Well, they went to both to get both experiences, and so they enjoyed it. And my oldest came back and had a discussion on it. She actually did it, for our church.
Yes.
And so I chose not to take the 10-year-old. Well, now she's 11. I just decided that we would do something in-house. We would learn about it, have those conversations. And I did ask her if she wanted to participate, and she said she didn't want to at that time, and that was understandable. So it is case by case, family by family.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that you honored the fact that she didn't want to.
Yeah.
Because forcing her to do something that she's not comfortable with is totally the opposite of what we're trying to, achieve.
Yeah. And something else I wanted to talk to you about is some of the negative images or negative thoughts. And I just had this conversation with my 11-year-old yesterday about what they feel about police officers or people that are supposed to protect them. I saw a video of a girl who was she was scared of the police officers, and someone recorded her, and the police officer had a conversation with her and just, helped her understand that it was a female. She's there to help. And then I asked my 11-year-old about it, and she, from what's going on, has, I guess, from what she's seen, and maybe even some of our conversation, had a kind of a negative image of the police officers. And I felt bad because I grew up, my dad was in law enforcement. So I'm like, oh no, that's not what we're, And so how are we supposed to talk to the kids about even those things where all of this bad stuff is happening, but there are some good people out there? And, and it's not all our responsibility. I feel like law enforcement has to also redefine their image in the community.
Absolutely. There's two things that kind of come to mind. One is understanding, again, it's down to experience. It makes sense why a child will be afraid.
Mhm.
And so allowing them to experience law enforcement who are um, projecting that good positive image that we
Yeah.
want, allow,
Mhm.
whether it's family members or whether it's going to talk to an officer or
Mhm.
buying them Starbucks, you know,
Yeah.
behind you because it's the officer and you appreciate it. So again,
Mhm.
it comes back to experience. And I tell, you know, my children, we have a very big family.
Mhm.
We love everybody in our family. But sometimes there might be one or two that we don't really like, but we don't throw away the whole family.
Yeah,
And so, even with the police, we appreciate them, but we also understand there might be one or two that are making some really bad choices.
yes, that's correct. Okay,
Mhm.
good. Well, this has been great. What role does empathy and compassion play into the conversations that we're going to have with our kids?
Empathy is everything. And it doesn't matter whether it's your spouse, your friend, your children. Empathy is what matters. Because once we connect on empathy, then we can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
We can disagree or agree about, for example, the image of the police force.
Mm-hmm.
What we can't debate is when a child feels scared.
Yeah, that's
And it
good.
doesn't really matter what, you know, if we agree with why they're scared, the fact is they're scared.
That's
And
correct.
so empathizing with that,
Mm-hmm.
even empathizing with people that might not be making the best choices. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when, you know, going back to the example of it's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
So I remind my kids, well, how did you feel when something wasn't fair? And did you always make the best choices?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, yeah. So you know, I often say that because someone makes a bad choice doesn't make them a bad person.
Correct.
And empathizing doesn't mean agreeing, but it means being able to really understand what somebody else is feeling.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
and I
right.
try really hard to tell, you know, I don't believe that there's bad people. I think people make bad decisions out of bad pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my
That's
compassion
great.
comes from. When I
Bad
see
decisions out
somebody
of bad
doing,
pain.
when I see somebody doing something, I'm not quick to judge. My first is compassion. There
Mm-hmm.
must be something really wrong, or they must have experienced something really horrible to
Mm-hmm.
think that it is okay to hurt another human being or to
Mm,
treat somebody that way. It
I love
doesn't mean
it.
that we have to be cool with them or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but it helps us to not be that angry and that resentment.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That is key. Now, before we end, do you have for parents any recommendations, books or resources? Is there some things that maybe we can even go to your website or contact you to help us get through this time and to navigate those conversations?
Okay, sure. But if I can, I want to mention one more thing.
Yes, please.
As an educator, I think you'll appreciate how people learn by doing.
Mm-hmm.
One kind of cool thing to do is to get like a ball of yarn
Mm-hmm.
and have the kids, you know, just go around the room and make like a spider web.
Okay.
And then once it's all spider web and tangled, ask them to put it back. And it's going to
Mm,
be really hard.
yeah.
And I say that because people need to understand that this whole topic of racism is very difficult and complex. And it's difficult to solve. But we can
Yes.
each take a part and do our own part. And as long
Mhm.
as we're working towards bringing that back together, then that gives kids hope. It gives me
Yes.
hope. But I would say one of the best resources is going to be the American Psychological Association, their
Mm.
website. They have a page called Resilience that really just talks about race and culture and all of this.
Mhm.
PBS Kids,
Mhm.
they actually have like a learning kit, and I think they have a parent toolkit. They
Mhm.
did, you know, Sesame Street and CNN did a really cool town hall. And
Oh,
then
wow.
Black Lives Matter actually has a huge amount of resources
Wow. Okay.
in digital resources, you know, videos that you can watch or movies that you can watch with your children.
That's great. That is great. Ton of resources. I enjoyed this conversation with you today. I'm going to put in the show notes how to contact you, your website, and all of that. Is there a best way for people to get in contact with you?
Well, the website will come directly to me, whether my phone number is on the website, and that's the
Mhm,
peabodypractice.com. And I
mhm.
also have the Peabody Practice Instagram and Facebook page. And
Okay.
on my Facebook page, I really try to put articles that are relevant to today and some good tools on there as well.
Okay, and I'll put all of that in our show notes as well. Well, thank you so much. Everything helps at this point. You've helped me to figure out how I can have a conversation with my youngest. And that's all we're looking for right now. We're looking for people to help us get through this and to encourage us, to motivate us. It shouldn't be overwhelming. It shouldn't be something that's going to make you depressed. And at one point, I think I was getting there because there's
Mhm.
so much that we've got to think about, including COVID. So it
Right.
was just like, I'm just overwhelmed. So I appreciate your experts and looking forward to maybe having a part two to this
Awesome.
conversation. Okay,
Thank you so much.
thank you.